I know that you are opposed to this proposal. Do you think this is simply political grandstanding by the Democrats, or is there substance to the idea of a moratorium on M&A during this crisis?
Scarlet, thank you so much for having. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Look, I won't speculate on why people are choosing to introduce legislation from a political perspective. But what I would say is that this strikes me as a profoundly counterintuitive time to try to ban M&A. What we are seeing in press reports and in the data we're collecting at the agency, looking at the deal flow noticed to us through the Hart-Scott-Rodino process, is a downturn in M&A. For a variety of reasons related to the financial crisis attending the coronavirus disaster, companies are less eager to get engaged in M&A. And so the deal lines are going down. And that's an odd time to call to ban mergers outright.
So, Commissioner, it's an interesting bill. A lot of us haven't seen the details of it. One of the main points that was made when this was unveiled was about the idea of primarily focusing on quote-unquote anti-competitive M&A, the idea that you would have larger companies consolidating and, in effect, competing with smaller and mid-sized companies that are struggling to recover. I'm wondering, specifically on that issue, is that something that you, as an FTC commissioner, thinks is under your purview to worry about?
Absolutely. Anti-competitive M&A is something we worry about every day. While we've had to adjust, like many others at the workplace, working from home with kids around and the like, the agency remains one of the two cops on the beat with our partners at the Antitrust Division of the Department of Justice, reviewing deals as they come in, scrutinizing them to see whether they have an anti-competitive effect, and if we can't resolve those effects, going to court. And we've gone to court over the last few months, including since the crisis began, on a number of deals in the healthcare space, in the consumer product space, and so on and so forth. But what we're talking about here isn't just about stopping anti-competitive transactions. It's about stopping pretty much all of them. And wrapped in with all of that is a lot of pro-competitive or competitively neutral transactions. And what you don't want to do is throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm all for policing to prevent anti-competitive M&A, and that is an effort that is continuing at my agency. But what we are seeing in the data, the facts on the ground, is that M&A is slowing, and that makes it, again, a very odd time to try to ban it all.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, there certainly is some opportunism taking place there in Washington, as there always is. Commissioner Phillips, speaking of anti-competitive deals, how are the FTC's antitrust investigations into the ones like Google and Facebook being affected by the coronavirus pandemic? Are they still ongoing? Do you see any changes to the timeline that you had laid out?
The work that we were doing before the crisis continues apace. Like other workplaces, we've had to adjust. People are working from home. We want to protect our workers, just like other employers. But all of the investigations that we were doing, well, the conduct investigations and the 6B investigations into tech M&A, that all is continuing. And I'm really pleased with the work of the staff. It's really amazing how people have pivoted very quickly to the new normal.
Commissioner, what's sort of the general, I guess, working environment right now for you and the other commissioners at the FTC with regards to how you're debating, how you're weighing out whether things should get approved or not approved? When you look at some of the recent decisions, they've pretty much come down 3-2. Is there a collaborative environment there? Is there an environment there where you feel that these decisions are being made in a way that is, I guess, weighing everything in a fair manner?
I like to think that's always the case at our agency. You know, people have different views. They bring different ideological priors. They may view a different set of facts differently. But I like to think we all approach our work in good faith. And, you know, in terms of how the coronavirus has affected things, you know, there are adjustments like everywhere, but more or less, the work that we are doing is the same. The big difference that we're seeing is that HSR filings, M&A activity is going down. And that's exactly what you would expect and exactly what we saw in prior financial crises.
Commissioner Phillips, our M&A reporters have noticed that the dissent opinions have been more strongly worded in the past 1.5 years. I guess the question here is the mood adversarial at the FTC between Republicans and Democrats? Can you give us some insight there?
I wouldn't say the mood is adversarial. I really enjoy the company of my colleagues, Republican and Democratic alike. I think the politics of antitrust and the public discourse around antitrust has gotten very heated, not just at the FTC, but in general over the past few years. And to some extent, the back and forth reflects that.
So, Commissioner, one specific example that I know we've been talking about here on the show, and really there's been talked a lot about lately because of the COVID-19 crisis, is that approval of the Covidien deal back in 2012. I know that predates you, but FTC Commissioner Rebecca Kelly Slaughter has voiced a lot of concern about that deal and how it's having ramifications today with regards to getting hospitals the ventilators they need. Specifically on the idea of just M&A in the medical space overall, not necessarily just Covidien, how do you think the FTC's approach is helping, if at all, that industry right now?
Healthcare in general as an industry and the specific subsectors of hospitals and pharmaceuticals and many other areas are a particular point of focus for our agency, and they have been for decades. In the last few months, we've gone to court in Philadelphia to stop a hospital merger. We've prevented pharmaceutical transactions. We went to court and successfully blocked, or we didn't end up having to do litigation, a merger in the gene sequencing space. The list goes on. So we are very acutely aware both of anti-competitive conduct, right? That is non-merger activity that can break the law in the healthcare space, but also of the impact that mergers can have. All of that is going to remain a focus at the agency. But what that does not mean, that we should stop all M&A. Because when you propose to stop all M&A, what you're talking about is explicitly throwing the baby out with the bathwater, taking all of those competitively neutral or pro-competitive transactions, the attempts to commit capital to allow workers to work and plants to run and innovation to occur. You're taking all of that off the table. And that, to me, doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense.
Final question for you here. I'm just staying with the healthcare space. The Celgene Bristol Myers deal that was announced in January 2019 was a bit of an odd situation. It took a long time to get approved. I wonder if the FTC is looking at biotech deals in a different way, with more nuance, perhaps with more consideration, especially with drug pricing being such a sticking point, a focus in Congress.
What I would say is that we look very carefully at every transaction. We listen to the theories of harm that anyone has in mind. In the Bristol Myers Celgene deal, I wrote separately to note that while there were some theories of why it might be problematic, those theories were not backed up by facts. And it's important to understand that under our legal regime, under our antitrust laws, we have to prove a case. We have to be able to show that a theory of harm is borne out by facts. And if we can't do that, there's no case. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. But certainly we look with a great deal of care at any transaction, be it in the pharma space or any other.